some of you who like to play Dungeons and Dragons just like we do can sometimes, I know from experience, have a difficult time explaining to those who are curious about the game how the game actually works. And this is going to be an informative cold open. It's not just going to be being all silly goofy. You know, we're going to learn something in this cold open. So, I already told him about this, but there's a clip on the internet of famed actor John Bernthal of The Walking Dead and The Punisher being taught how to play D&D. Very informative, very influential. He's shown in a very concise way how it works. Google it. John Bernthal learns how to play D&D. Very recent. Go check it out. But for those of us who were born in the 1960s and did not have access to the internet during the early days of learning how to play Dungeons and Dragons.
When we tied our horses up to
when you tied your horses up after you got to school. You didn't have these things to teach you how to play D&D. So instead, you had to rely on what was contained within the original box set to learn how to play. So what are we talking about today?
Today, we are talking about...
Play the music! Sorry to interrupt. Go ahead.
No, you're not. Today we are going to talk about Module B1, In Search of the Unknown. We're not going to be going into the detail about Module B1, In Search of the Unknown. We're going to talk a little bit about why it exists.
Sure.
But what I wanted to focus on was its strengths of being an excellent beginner introduction to Dungeons and Dragons.
Yes.
So, In Search of the Unknown, Dungeon Module B1. This came out in 1979, and it was written by Mike Carr. Mike Carr was an early employee of TSR.
Sorry.
Mike Carr was an early employee of TSR, and he did a number of things with TSR. He also created Fight for the Skies, Dawn Patrol. It was a World War I aerial combat game, which is actually really cool.
I've never played that, but it does sound like fun.
Yeah, it's actually a really well-made game.
Yeah.
But he was given the task of writing a module for inclusion in the Dungeons and Dragons basic set. Okay, now this is my original from 1979. It's the 1978 version. I bought it in early 1979. Included within it was Module B1. Now, I never used Module B1 in and of itself back in the 1980s, back in the early 1980s, because I was kind of disdainful about modules. But I did end up integrating this into my campaign in a way that it wasn't intended to be used, but that's neither here nor there. Now that I'm looking back on it though, there was some really good stuff that was put in here by Mike Carr explaining, number one, what Dungeons and Dragons was. And keep in mind, this is 1979. Nobody knew what Dungeons and Dragons was. Or if you heard about it, it's because, you had a crazy friend who told you that, you could be a knight in a game. You could be a knight in a game and go and kill monsters. But you didn't really know how the game worked. And there was no internet to go check out, see somebody playing online. You just had to hear about it, or you had to, like you were saying, you had to read about it or be given some material to learn about it on your own. Yeah, it's a weird concept for you, I know. But let's take it. I don't want to get into the ins and outs of Module B1. It's the detail of the module itself is not what's important in this video. What's important is the tips and techniques that they impart to you about how you should play the game.
Now, I'm like you guys. I don't necessarily know exactly what we're going to be talking about here, so I'm just along on this ride with you. Clueless, per usual.
Dang it, he always steals my chance at making these jokes. They have a lot of... sorry. No, I'm not actually. I'm really... Yeah. Yeah, right. Mr. Sensitive over here. They actually go through and they give tips for players they explain what Dungeons & Dragons is to aspiring DMs. And they specifically say that this dungeon, Quazcaton, is, and people are going to say it's Quazquetan, Quazcaton. No, it's Quazcaton. Okay, just accept it.
Comment how you say it down below.
Or, yeah, and so that I can say, no, it's not. It's Quazcaton.
I just want to see a bunch of people typing out the word.
Yeah, exactly.
I pronounce it
spelling.
wrong.
But the thing is, there is even talk about how the dungeon itself is not very difficult, but it is filled with things that you might find as you take to making dungeons of your own.
Which is
In
cool.
other words, this is kind of like what they consider a standard beginner's everything that you might encounter, or a lot of the things that you might encounter in a basic dungeon set. That's what this is all about. But I want to start off with not going to tell you what's in Module B1. You can go and I believe that this is available on Drive-Thru RPG as a PDF, possibly for only like $6 or $7. If I'm right on that, check it out. It's a really cool piece of D&D history. If you want to learn what they were expecting, how they expected people to play the game back in the day, this is going to give you insight into that. But let's start with tips for the players. This is a sheet that comes along with this. This is something that you took from the module, and as a dungeon master, you gave it to your players to read.
And I swear, if any of you comment down below, video starts at whatever the timestamp is right now, I'm going to lose it on you.
He doesn't. He gets annoyed.
Just watch the video. I'm sorry, did you make the video? No.
Anyway, moving on. This is the player's background sheet. Okay, and on one side of it, it tells you all about the standard background setting for all players to read prior to their first adventure. So it talks about the fortress of Rogan the Fearless and Zelgar the Unknown. That's where you're going to go. Zelgar and Rogan have disappeared, and your player and their companions, they are going to go to the fortress, and they're going to make their way through it and find the treasures that Zelgar and Rogan have left behind. Yes, you have encountered this dungeon.
Where?
It's where all of your great stuff is stored near the Pass of Aram.
Is it where my people are at right now?
Yes.
Uh-oh.
Anyway.
Oh, no.
Anyway. So on one side, there is the background of the dungeon itself. But on the other side, there is a list of 12 characters, each of the 4 character classes: clerics, fighting men, magic users, and thieves. So you can have one you can use, and basically it's just a bunch of names that you can use. But then below that, it has tips for players. I'm going to read these because there are 10 of them, and I think they're actually very, very good. It says, beginning players would do well to profit from some basic advice before beginning their D&D careers, and with that in mind, the following points are offered for consideration. 1. Be an organized player. Keep accurate records on your character, experience, abilities, items possessed, etc. for your own purposes and to aid the dungeon master.
Great piece of advice.
Very excellent. It's excellent advice. Number 2. Always keep in mind that the dungeon master is the moderator of the game and as such deserves the continued cooperation, consideration, and respect of all the players. If you disagree with him, present your viewpoint with deference to his position as game judge, but be prepared to accept his decision as final. After all, keep in mind that you may not know all aspects of the overall game situation. I can't tell you how many times people say, well, that's not the way this is supposed to work. And I've had to say, that's because you only know about 10% of what's going on. So don't think that you know all that's happening. It's happened more than once.
Of saying
I don't know that you've ever done that.
No.
I don't think you ever have.
because I'm respectful.
But I have other players who have done that. And in any case, not everything will always go your way. Number 3, cooperate with your fellow players and work together when adventuring. Remember that on any foray into the dungeon or wilderness, a mix of character classes will be beneficial since the special abilities of the various characters will complement each other and add to the overall effectiveness of the party.
Nice.
That's the way the game was played back in those days. You didn't have one character who could do magic, fight, do everything. That wasn't the case. Fighting men fought. Magic users used magic. Clerics had a combination of both, and thieves were thieves.
And we still kind of try and play that way.
We by and large do. We do have some cross characters. You know, you can have a fighter magic user, but it's
they're
much tougher
usually
for them
higher
to play.
level.
Right.
Yeah.
Number 4, be neither too hasty or too sluggish when adventuring. If you are too fast in your exploration, you may recklessly endanger yourself and your fellow adventurers and fall prone to every trick and trap you encounter. If you are too slow, you will waste valuable time and may be waylaid by more than your share of wandering monsters without accomplishing anything. Number 5, avoid arguing. While disagreements about a course of action will certainly arise from time to time, players should quickly discuss their options and reach a consensus in order to proceed. Bickering in the dungeon will only create noise, which I make happen all the time. With most people don't realize that when they're if you're standing there conversing with other characters, I make it so that's echoing down corridors. People often forget that. Bickering in the dungeon will only create noise, which may well attract wandering monsters. Above all, remember that D&D is just a game, and a little consideration will go far toward avoiding any hard feelings. 6. Be on your guard. Don't be overly cautious, but be advised that some non-player characters may try to hoodwink you. Players may double-cross you. And while adventuring, tricks and traps await the unwary. Of course, you won't avoid every such pitfall. Dealing with the uncertainties is part of the fun and challenge of the game. That's part of the cool part. Not knowing what's going to happen. Maybe it's going to kill your character. Maybe your character gets killed, but that threat of death, as we always say, is part of what makes the game fun.
And hoodwinking other characters, especially other player characters, and taking all of their stuff is a specialty of some people who are members of this channel. Isn't that right?
Don't be surprised if everything is not always as it seems. 7. Treat any hirelings or henchmen fairly. If you reward them generously and do not expose them to great risks of life and limb that your own character would not face, then you can expect a continuing loyalty, although there may be exceptions, of course. 8. Very important. Know your limits. Your party may not be a match for every monster you encounter, and occasionally it pays to know when and how to run away from danger. Likewise, a dungeon adventure may have to be cut short if your party suffers great adversity and or depleted strength. Many times it will take more than one adventure to accomplish certain goals, and it will thus be necessary to come back out of a dungeon to heal wounds, restore magical abilities and spells, and reinforce a party's strengths. Number 9, use your head.
What?
I just think I don't want to use my head.
I don't want to use my head.
Use your head. Many of the character's goals in the game can be accomplished through strength of arms or magic. Others, however, demand common sense and shrewd judgment as well as logical deduction. The most successful players are those who can effectively use both aspects of the game to advantage. I think that may be the best key to a player for a player.
Yeah.
The best tip for a player.
Yeah.
Number 10. D&D is a role-playing game, and the fun of the game comes in playing your character's role. Take on your character's persona and immerse yourself in the game setting, enjoying the fantasy element and the interaction with your fellow players and the dungeon master. So,
everyone have fun.
have fun, and it actually finishes with that. Enjoy yourself and good luck.
Yeah.
So that's the tips for players, which I think is very nice, concise, and excellent in terms of explaining to people, here's the kind of thing that you need to be considering when you decide you want to play Dungeons & Dragons.
Great advice, yeah.
Let's move on to the actual module itself. And we will...
After 3 of your bookmarks have just popped out while we've been sitting here
I've got to get
somehow.
new bookmarks because
There's no sticky on them.
There's no sticky on these. So it's just like laying a piece of paper on there. It just doesn't work. Anyway, so again, Dungeon Module B1, In Search of the Unknown. This package forms a complete module for use with basic Dungeons & Dragons. It is especially designed as an instructional aid for beginning dungeon masters and players, specifically created to enable new dungeon masters to initiate play with a minimum of preparation. That's how it starts. So this is from the very get-go telling you, this is to get you started in this new cool game that you have somehow managed to discover pre-internet and
How did they survive?
It was so much cooler back then. It really was.
It sounds like it was pretty cool.
And also, just the name of the module I think is almost perfect. In Search of the Unknown.
Oh yeah, excellent.
I mean, if you've never played this game before, if you didn't understand what a role-playing game, it's like In Search of the Unknown.
How exciting!
It is. I mean, just the title alone.
So much potential.
Mike Carr. If you're the one who came up with the title for it. Whoever came up with the title, it's fantastic.
Yeah.
It's so good. In Search of the Unknown. Because that's really how the game was sold to me.
Yeah.
You're going to go on this adventure where you're going to be going through this unknown place and mapping it out as you go, and you're going to be finding treasure and killing monsters. That's how it was sold to me.
Oh no, that doesn't sound like fun.
It sounded really boring.
Yeah.
All right. Special instructions on the inside of In Search of the Unknown.
By Mike Carr.
By Mike Carr. Here's been a problem.
I don't know what you're talking
about. Let's see here. This is interesting. Those who intend to be beginning players using this module would be well advised to stop reading this now and to avoid further examination of the module details or game map.
I like that.
The reason for this is that the enjoyment of the module will be much more enhanced when the challenge of the unknown and unexpected confronts the participants, who will not be able to benefit from any familiarity with the game situation other than the background provided by the referee. This element of the unknown and the resultant exploration in search of unknown treasures is precisely what Dungeons & Dragons is all about. And knowing too much can greatly spoil the fun of the gaming experience. So, starts right off there. Mm-hmm. This is what this game is all about. Moves then into notes for the Dungeon Master, because the players are not supposed to have read past that part. Notes for the Dungeon Master. As a beginning Dungeon Master, you will find this module helpful in many ways. First of all, it serves as a graphic example of a beginning dungeon. For this reason, it should prove illustrative to fledgling dungeon masters who will benefit from a look at what other dungeon design, quote-unquote, looks like. Those designing their own dungeons will want to note various aspects of this dungeon which will give them valuable insights into the creative process which allows them to formulate their own unique dungeon and game setting. So, again, it's letting you know up front, this is the way people have been playing Dungeons & Dragons, creating dungeons, where we're from. We're just sending this thing out to you so that you can have an understanding of the way we're playing the game. But it also goes on to say, essentially they're saying, take what you want from this if you're making your own dungeon, take some of this stuff out of here and put it into your campaign or your dungeon so that you can give it your own flavor, but at least here's some ideas for you to get the ball rolling, to get the dungeon ball rolling.
It's just great. It's very inclusive. If you don't know how to do this, that's all right. That's probably why you bought this box. So we're going to teach you step by step how we think you should do it, and then you can do whatever you want after that. But this is how it works, and I like that.
Yeah. Second, this package provides an almost ready-made game situation which can be utilized for one or more playings. Some initial preparation is necessary in addition to reading the material through one or two times before using it in a game. The preparation, however, is interesting and fun as well as instructional, for it shows how a dungeon master, or DM, that's in parentheses, stalks the dungeon with assorted treasures and monsters before any adventuring begins. And this is very true. That's one of the fun parts of creating dungeons, as most of you, I'm sure, know. You create a temple, or, a ruin, or whatever. Part of the fun is going through and figuring out what needs to go in there and why it's there. That's a creative experience for the dungeon master on their own, and I think that that's something that they're trying to let you understand here very early on. Mm-hmm. This is the fun part, guys.
Yeah.
Thirdly, there are several salient points of good dungeon design illustrated in this module, which new DMs would be wise to note. Likewise, they should keep these factors in mind when they start to design their own game maps and situations. For instance, since it is important to offer a challenge commensurate to the player's level, this 2-level dungeon design is made specifically for Basic D&D for exploration by beginning players in a party of 3 to 6 adventurers. In general, this dungeon is less deadly and more forgiving than one designed to test experienced players. It is designed to be fairly challenging, however, and is by no means easy. Careless adventurers will pay the penalty for a lack of caution, only one of the many lessons to be learned within the dungeon. The dungeon is designed to be instructive for new players. Most of it should be relatively easy to map, although there are difficult sections. Next, the monsters encountered will generally be commensurate with the adventurer's ability to defeat them. For the few that are too formidable, the adventurers will have to learn the necessary art of fleeing or else employing more powerful means against them. I think that's exceptionally important. Like, no, don't think you
Run.
can hack your way through everything. You got to run sometimes, guys. The treasures to be found will generally be small, although a couple of more lucrative finds are possible if the adventurers are clever or lucky. And this is one of the things that I love about these early modules, especially this one. When you found that +1 spear, man, you were in hog heaven. You were like ahead of the game if you had a +1 spear. Or maybe you found a dagger that gave you a -1 to your armor class. That was really cool. Like, see, you're looking at me like, no, because I know why you're looking at me, because I'm in the process of taking away a lot of your magic. I forgot about that. We'll move on.
All my stuff.
We'll move on.
Gone.
I'm having a major change in my campaign as far as magic is concerned.
Major change.
And major change and general chaos will ensue. He's not happy about this.
Angry.
Okay, he's angry. Okay, the dungeon includes a good assortment of typical features which players can learn to expect, including some interesting tricks and traps, such as secret doors, illusions, and magic mouths, a wind corridor which may extinguish torches and open flames, a room of mysterious pools, a room of doors, a water pit trap which suddenly drops adventurers to the lower level, a portcullis trap where vertical bars drop behind a party in a dead-end corridor, a pair of teleport rooms to confuse explorers, several magical treasures, most beneficial, some cursed, mysterious containers with a variety of contents for examination. The setting is neither too simple nor too difficult. Adventurers can exit by either returning to the entrance or locating the other secret exit. 2 ways down to the lower level are available for discovery, and a trap may also bring adventurers unexpectedly there. So this is really cool, and this is laid out in such a way that Dungeon B1 it's something that you have to populate yourself. They give you the tables, they give you all of the monsters and treasures, but you actually have to go in and put them into the rooms as you want them to be.
That's cool.
They have huge explanations for each room. I mean, actually, I think they almost go a little bit overboard, but I think that they were trying to say, these are the kinds of descriptions that you want to make available to people. I never went into that kind of detail. I still don't. But I think they were giving you the ultimate in terms of the descriptive text that you should be attaching to a room.
The things you need to be able to envision.
Exactly. That's exactly right.
Even if it's not written down.
But that's one of the things about this module is that it's learning and it's teaching you, and you're learning without having the internet there to do it for you. You actually have to go in and read through this and then make use of this quasi-exercise that they give you about populating the dungeon so that you know how to go about that process as you move forward with your Dungeons & Dragons career, as they said.
Which I love as a phrase.
Dungeons & Dragons career? Yeah. Wish I had it as a job. would have been a much better job. Then it kind of finishes up here with just a couple of things. How to be an effective dungeon master. So you had the player side, now let's go to the Dungeon Master side. The Dungeon Master, as referee, is the pivotal figure in any game of Dungeons & Dragons. And there's kind of a new movement to do away with Dungeon Masters, which I've kind of seen hints about. I know that's a big topic on the internet, but I generally don't read that kind of stuff.
Because people are lazy and they don't want to be the Dungeon Master.
Well, I don't know what it is, but it's just kind of a, really? Because, I guess it could work, but, I don't know. It's just kind of weird. Accordingly, his ability and expertise, as well as fairness, will be important factors in whether or not the game will be enjoyable for all of the participants, as well as for himself. D&D is a role-playing game. Now, keep in mind, nobody knows what D&D is at this point. They've picked up this box because they've heard of this game through their cousin's friend. They're trying to figure out what it is. Well, here we go. D&D is a role-playing game and is unlike traditional games which have a firm basis of regulated activity and repetitious action. I like that. Not to say that board games are boring, but they are repetitious and they're regulated in what you can do. D&D is free-flowing and often goes in unknown and unpredictable directions. And that is precisely the reason it is so different and challenging. The Dungeon Master is best described as the moderator of the action, for he oversees the whole process, keeps the game moving, resolves the action based upon events occurring and player choices made, and monitors the actions and events outside of the player group. In other words, he handles the monsters encountered, determines their actions, determines the actions of non-player characters encountered, etc. His responsibilities are considerable, but his foremost concern should be to provide an enjoyable game which is challenging to the players. This means that risk should be balanced with reward, and that game situations are neither too easy nor too deadly. Above all, he must be fair, reasonable, and worthy of the respect of all the participants. First of all, it is crucial to keep in mind that D&D is a game based on player interaction and player choice. The game generally follows the course of the player's actions. The game generally follows if not always their plans. As moderator, you present an ever-changing situation as it occurs. Think of it like an unfolding story, or even a movie if you like to think in those terms. And the players respond pretty much as they desire. As the game goes on, you are presenting them with 100 different opportunities and choices. Exactly how the game goes will depend upon their response to those opportunities and choices. That's pretty much it. I mean, that's D&D in a nutshell.
Very concise description.
Second of all, a good DM remains above the battle and does not attempt to influence player actions or channel the activity in a particular direction. That's something that a lot of dungeon masters do. And I understand doing that depending on how often you play. Yeah. That is something that does happen. But I think that the ultimate best game is for them to just let the players get on with it.
Though there is nothing wrong, I think, with nudging characters in a certain direction, right. Especially if the characters are being poorly behaved and they're being problematic on purpose, then you can really nudge them some way to get everybody back on track.
Right. The Dungeon Master should do all he can to assist players in their quest without actually providing important information unless the players themselves discover it or put the pieces of a puzzling problem together through deduction or questioning or a combination of the two. In the same vein as Dungeon Master, you will enjoy watching players wrestle with the problems you present them with. Although you may set up situations to challenge them, you must understand that you are not their adversary, nor are you necessarily out to defeat them. I can't tell you how many games I've joined in where that was the attitude of the Dungeon Master. You will enjoy moderating a well-played game where players respond to the challenges encountered much more than one where the adventurers foolishly meet their demise in quick time. However, if your players abandon caution or make stupid mistakes, let them pay the price, but be fair. In many cases, a danger due to lack of caution can be overcome, or a mistaken judgment countered by quick thinking and resourcefulness, but let your players do the thinking and the doing.
Yes.
Finally, or lastly, it is important to remember that the Dungeon Master is the final arbiter in his or her game. If players disagree with you, hear them out and reasonably consider their complaint. However, you are the final judge, and they should understand that, as well as the fact that not everything will go their way or as they expect. Be fair, but be firm. With human nature as it is, players will undoubtedly attempt to try to talk you into or out of all sorts of things. Part of the fun of being a DM is this verbal interplay, but in the end, what you say is what goes.
Yeah.
So that's to me, that's one of the best explanations of what Dungeons & Dragons is for a person who has never heard of the game, doesn't understand it, doesn't get it. And really that's in
3 pages?
3 pages, 2.5 pages. Well, and back in the day, 2.5 pages in a rule book was nothing. So that's one of the reasons that I love B1, because it sets out what it's attempting to do, and then it goes and it accomplishes that. And I'd be curious to know how many people got their first taste of Dungeons and Dragons from this.
Yeah.
I remember sending this to me. I was in the Civilian Conservation Corps. I was in the Youth Conservation Corps back in '79. And I had made some good friends there, and I talked to them about Dungeons and Dragons because I'd started playing the year before. And I sent this to them. I bought a copy of this game, this particular basic set, and I sent it to 2 of them. I sent 1 copy to these 2 friends of mine, just because they wanted to know what the game was all about. So I'm responsible for passing this on to 2 people. I wonder how many people ended up with this as their introduction to D&D and are still using it and are still playing D&D to this day because of the influence of Module B1.
And I think that's the thing. It doesn't just lay out the actual process for playing the game, which I think will enumerate more on that later. But it gives how to word this. It gives you the style with which you should play it.
Yes.
I think as well. And I think that's...
It gives you the responsibilities.
Yeah, and I think that's
Spells
really
out.
important because it puts you in kind of the mindset of what everyone has to do in order for the game to be successful, how you have to approach things, what the dungeon master does versus what the players do. And I think that's cool because it sets up the proper expectations for that partnership to take place.
For that
words
partnership,
that
yes.
very well.
Yes.
Yeah. So no, I like this a lot. I think this is a great introduction. It's got me thinking. We've never made a video on it, but I really like the intro dungeon in the DM's guide. I point to the books, of course, that you cannot see. But I think that also has kind of a similar feel about it, and that it's a little bit more spelled out than this in terms of the examples of this person does this, then this person does this. And I just like that a lot. But having all of these resources available to people who are just starting to figure out the game is really cool, and I think that's very helpful.
Well, and I think that one of the things that we need to do is we did a video on this. This is my favorite Dungeons and Dragons book right here. This is the game that I still essentially play. We do a lot. We have a lot of AD or first edition things that we bring into the game. As my friend John says, this is the game that we have always played. AD&D is just a series of supplements that is layered on top of this.
Yeah.
I think that what we need to do is we need to not now, but I think we need to go through this entire book.
Yeah.
Show how simple this game was back in the day, and maybe even look at the Tower of Xenopus, which is another basic dungeon, sample dungeon, that you can get to understand. Helps you to understand what a dungeon is. We need to go over that at some point.
That's a good idea.
So we'll do that in another video.
Keep your eyes peeled for that. But if you ever used In Search of the Unknown, or you ever played it, or use it as your intro, or just played it as a module, let us know down below. We'd love to hear your stories and your experiences.
Yeah. What are your memories of it? What are your recollections of it back in the day, or even now? I know that this was actually redone by, I think it was Goodman Games for 5th edition D&D.
Oh, cool. I didn't know.
Yeah, it's still something that's kicking around today. But what I do want to say is, Mike Carr, thank you for putting this together for me and my friends way back in the day. You have no idea what kind of an influence that had on so many people.
Yeah.
Aside from that,
the usual Patreon.
you guys are great.
You are fantastic. Thank you to all of our patrons. If you're interested in joining our Patreon, link is down in the description below. Our next Kickstarter, Expedition to the Forest of Moon, has not launched yet, but if you would like to check out the landing page and see what it's all going to look like, click the link down in the description below, and be sure to give us a follow over on Kickstarter.
Yeah, it helps us a lot.
It doesn't tie you into anything monetarily, but it will give you updates that we release on what the status of the Kickstarter is. We're very excited about this. We think that you all will like this quite a bit.
We think so.
Follow us on Instagram.
Newsletter. We have the Old Warlock newsletter, which we are going to rename because some people said that's a really boring name for a newsletter. The Old Warlock newsletter. Why don't you try this? We're going to go with a new name for the newsletter. If you want to see a copy of the newsletter, go to our website, oldwarlockgames.com, and we have it posted up on that. But if you would like to have the newsletter emailed to you, it's just a PDF. It's free. Send us an email saying, hey, sign me up for the newsletter at officialoldwarlock@gmail.com. Information will be in the description. Finally, we never ask people to do this. If you haven't done so, subscribe to the channel. And like this video. We've never, ever in 5 years asked people to do that.
Like and subscribe.
Because we're stupid that way.
Yeah.
Yeah, it would make a big difference, and it'll help us to spread the word about what it is that we do.
Yeah.
After 5 long years.
5 years. Hey, almost exactly 5 years, actually, from when we're filming this. What's today's date?
I think it is.
Yeah, really close.
Like 2 or 3 days away from our 5-year anniversary. So please do all of those things, and that's all we've got. I am Jim.
I'm Alex.
Keep your sword on free.
Bye.